Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookish Rum and I am back with another video. As you can see from the title of this video, I am here to do my librarian Q&A part 4. I believe this is part 4. If I'm saying the wrong number, it will definitely be correct in the title. So as always, I would like to apologize for any background noise that you may hear. I feel like I have to do this as a precursor for like all of my videos now. I am just filming whatever I can fit it in, so I can't control that realm of perfect silence. So we're just gonna go with it. So a few months ago, I took questions, I believe, just on my community board about what it's like being a librarian, and I decided to split this up into so many different parts because there were like 85 questions and I really cannot answer 85 questions in one video. It would be hours of footage, especially since I can get pretty detailed in some of these questions. So today I thought I would do another aspect of this and actually answer about another 10 to 15 questions. Probably more so on the range of 10, but if we get to 15, then that's also great, but we're gonna shoot for 10. Now, before I actually ended up having snacks and stuff, today is just one of those days where I just don't have snacks at all, but I am here to answer the questions that you all have asked me. So I am going to attempt to say everyone's name right. If you notice that your question is up here and I have not said your name right, please correct me. I do not mind being corrected. Okay, so the first question comes from Cassie Lino, and they asked me, what are some challenges most people don't realize librarians have? So with this question, I often feel like a lot of people feel like librarians are individuals who just check books in and out and that we get to read all day, and I think that that is a misconception. If you work, especially like in my instance where I work in a public library, we're very front facing, meaning that I am constantly helping people who come in and out of our doors, and a lot of people don't come to the library just to read books. They come for workforce development, they come to fax, they come to copy, they come to scan, they come to, you know, when I say workforce development, I mean like resume help, job application. We've dealt with people who've needed help acquiring housing, applying for different things that include food stamps or whatever the case may be. So we have a very strenuous job in terms of maintaining energy. I think that we are a profession where we're constantly attempting to make people feel warm and welcome, and that we're here to assist them. And sometimes when you're doing that, it becomes quite draining. It's not that you don't want to help people, it's that you are helping people 7 to 8 hours a day consistently. And this is true of any customer service job, that when you do that, it ends up being a situation where by the end of the day, you're very much drained and you're not anticipating really wanting to interact with that many people anymore. I think that a lot of times people forget that being a librarian is in essence being in customer service, because you're all about engaging the patrons that come in and out of your doors and wanting to assist them with their needs. The next question comes from Ricky, and he asks, as a librarian, what trends have you noticed in people's reading patterns? Also, how do you organize your books at home? In terms of reading patterns, I do feel like we get a little bit more engagement with children's materials, because that is the most pivotal point, I think, in which a lot of people feel like they need to use their libraries. Not saying that other age groups don't, but there's a heavy movement of children's materials because that's the most prime time for people to learn to read. So we see a lot of children's materials that will end up circulating. I also think that in terms of audiences that come in, it seems like from high school graduation to mid-20s, we don't see as much in and out of that specific age group, and that could be for a lot of reasons. That's college age groups. They are discovering new things about themselves. They are entering the job force for the first time. So it's a lot of different things that happen within that age group. So we don't see as many within that age group. But I also think that, and that's not necessarily reading patterns, but that is something that I have noticed. I think in terms of reading patterns, people are becoming more acclimated to reading resources, especially since the time of COVID, when that was the only thing that was accessible to a lot of patrons. is the use of ebooks and audiobooks. So I have seen a lot of people become more accustomed to reading ebooks. Of course, there are those who are true hard, like I need the physical copy, which I can be like that sometimes, but even I have become more acclimated to reading ebooks and listening to audiobooks. I have also seen older generations, especially like the boomers, have started to become more acclimated with using an iPad and a Kindle and reading ebooks and listening to audiobooks. So that's something that I've seen more of in the years that I've been working in the library field. Whereas I think when it wasn't like it was first coming about, but I know when I first started in my job, I didn't really see as many. And now I'm starting to see an influx, because I think that it's an easier acquisition. People are very much so into quick turnaround, and you don't have to usually wait as long maybe for an e-copy, and it's something that you could do from the access of your own home instead of having to physically go to the library. So that is something that I have seen change in terms of reading patterns. So Pam asked a very interesting question, which I think everybody's probably going to be interested in, and it's, I'm just wondering if you have heard anything about how they're going to disinfect books after they have been returned. So every library system I think is doing something different, but there have been studies done on the time in which COVID does rest on book materials. So a lot of libraries are doing a quarantining process. So that means that when you return your physical books, they actually quarantine them in a separate room, and when they quarantine them, this gives the time for the lack of transfer of the coronavirus. And I think that the time that everyone has pretty much established is anywhere up to 96 hours. And how libraries work after that quarantining process, I think, varies. There are some people who actually have cleaning tools specifically for the books. There are some that don't. I think that the answer to this question really passed the quarantining, because I feel like that is a universal thing here in the United States, is quarantining the materials before they put back into the collection. Any extensive cleaning products after that, I think, depends on your library's funding. So there is no universal way, except I think the quarantining, because I think that came top down, meaning that I think that that was even discussed amongst ALA and how long the things should be quarantined, at least amongst library directors. So the next question comes from Historiadora. I think I said that right. And the question is, what degree or degrees do you need in order to be a librarian, and how do these differ for different types of librarians? Okay. So this is something that is changing, and this also varies from library to library. So for the most part, you're going to need a master's in library information science. And of course, for that, you have to go to graduate school. Your undergraduate degree does not have to be in library science. It can be in anything that you want it to be. But for most places, in order to get the title of librarian, you still have to have your master's in library information science. There are some areas that are now getting rid of that requirement, meaning that if you interview well, you have the necessary skills and the qualifications, they will hire you without the degree. But that's not everywhere. That's not a universal thing. There are some people who are doing that to lower the barriers and to have more accessibility, especially for people of color who are less likely to get a master's in library information science. In my experience, what I have seen is that you can still enter the library profession without having a degree, but not necessarily always at the librarian level. So there are things called like library pages, library assistants. And what they do is they are front facing, they work, they do everything that a librarian does, but not necessarily the training behind them. But what was so interesting is that I worked as a library assistant before getting my degree and becoming officially titled a librarian. But a lot of the work that I did as a library assistant was super helpful when I was in graduate school. And I went to graduate school with the mindset of always working in a public library, as well as working specifically in youth services. So I did a lot of coursework that focused on children's collections and teen collections, which is why I read so much of that stuff and why I'm very adamant about reading a lot of that stuff. But I have seen people who focus in on different areas. There are medical librarians, there are business librarians, there are librarians that focus specifically on adult services. There are collection development librarians, collection development acquisition. There are so many different librarians. There's school librarians as well, or media specialists, depending upon where you are. It's is such a wide and varied field. You'd be very surprised at what businesses actually require librarians. I was not even really aware of like some Fortune 500 companies that require librarians, or even the fact that the medical field actually requires librarians. So it depends. There are just certain areas that I would never go into. Like, I don't want to be an academic librarian. There's librarians that specifically work with post K-12 education. They work at a university level, and it's very research heavy. I have done enough research. I have 2 master's degrees. I can't do the research thing anymore. So that's a little different. I do know that like media specialists or school librarians, a lot of them also have to have a teaching certificate or license. So there's different requirements for each, and I don't know the specific requirements of each. I really just know more so about the public librarian sphere, a little bit about academic because I have friends who work in academic libraries, and school media specialists and school librarians because I work very closely with them because I work with youth services. So it just varies, and every sect of librarianship has different requirements and different expectations and different goals. Me working in a public library as a teen librarian or working specifically with youth services, my emphasis and what I want to do is not going to line up with what academic librarians do. We may have some crossover, but it's not going to be a lot. So all that to say that librarianship is a very varied field. It's not just the stereotype that people always have of us. It is just a very diverse, in terms of directions that you can go in, field. So I think that answers your questions. I think that for the most part, what you're going to find is that most are going to require that you have a master's. And then when you take your master courses, you can streamline what you want to go into. Like, you can take courses that are specifically for youth services, or you could take specific courses for adult services, or you could take specific courses for archiving and preservation, which is a sect of librarianship. So this is another good question asked by Anna. And they asked, have you noticed a change to the ways libraries have been used since the pandemic? Are people more or less engaged, or reading certain format genres of books more or less? So I don't have the specific numbers. I don't work in collection development. I'm responsible for the collection at my location that specifically is related to youth services, specifically teen services. But what we have heard, like through the grapevine, is that the e-content soared, of course, because it's all that people had access to. So we were on the back end of purchasing a lot more ebook copies of stuff, so lines wouldn't be long. So yes, in terms of did it change the way people use the resources? Yes, people were very much so very engaged in using e-content, whether that was e-audiobooks or ebooks. Hoopla, people were learning how to use Hoopla. I think a lot more people use Libby. Hoopla was not as, I wouldn't say wasn't as popular, but I don't think as many people use it because they were used to using Libby. So I think probably a lot more people were using Hoopla and also Cloud 3M just to have access to digital stuff. Of course, there was digital programming, which people have been very, very much excited about. But now that we are in a different phase of working, we are now seeing, of course, people use curbside pickup a lot. People are putting stuff on hold because they want to get access to their library materials. So I think most libraries are kind of seeing that shift in from specifically dealing a lot with e-content to now seeing a lot more circulation of physical items once again, because people have been able now to use curbside pickup, which is becoming a big thing for all library systems across the country. All right, so Laura asked a question. Do you get the chance to read books early before they're put on the shelves? It depends. So not necessarily. I think people think that we get access to books more quickly than what you think. I do know that sometimes we do get access to ARCs because we are a library system. Our collection development team does allow us to choose from those ARCs that have been acquired, and we are allowed to read them. We usually pass them around amongst each other. Some of them we do end up keeping. So I do have some ARCs on my shelves that I have gotten through my library specifically. There are times when we order books and we're able to look at them, but for the most part, I don't think a lot of people do. Honestly, we just don't have the time We don't have the time. So I know that a lot of us in the bookish community do use stuff like NetGalley. However, librarians are very known for using Edelweiss. I don't even know how to say the name of it, to be honest with you. I don't know if anybody knows how to say the name of this company, but librarians have better access over there than we do on NetGalley because we're allowed to actually change our, I guess, our affiliation to librarianship. So we're more likely to get approvals because we are librarians than if we are just kind of a book influencer, and they kind of give us a little bit more free range. I think publishers give librarians a little bit more free range on Edelweiss than they do anybody else. I've actually heard a publisher say that most likely if you're not a librarian and you request through that platform, they're not going to give it to you. You'd have to go to NetGalley. So we do use that, or at least I use that as a means to read books. And I do read titles as much as I can because I want to be able to request certain stuff that our collection development team can pick up if I know that we don't have a copy. But our collection development team is really good about acquiring a lot of stuff. So it's not really an often thing, but I just like to keep up with stuff. Do I always get access to everything early? No, I think that's kind of a misconception that we get access to a lot of things early. That's not necessarily true. We pretty much see a lot of stuff at the same time. Now, can we see stuff in the system early? Yeah, but it's an ethics thing. Like, you want to give your public like a fair shot at getting stuff before you do, because it's to serve them. So yes and no. And I think I left an answer to a question off. I was asked, how do I organize my shelves? And I didn't even answer the question. So I do my shelves by, I was doing them solely by age, target age. And I think I stopped doing that, but kind of not really. So I do have a shelf that's over here, which you can't see is strictly middle grade. This shelf behind me is all Black authors, whether it's adults, well, it's Black, it's like 90% Black authors, and then any other diverse authors. And this includes both YA and adult, no middle grade though. Yes, middle grade is at the top, so right there. And then over on this side, I have contemporary and romance across the room. I have all YA, fantasy, and sci-fi, predominantly all by white authors on that side. And then I have, on the other side, I have manga, graphic novels, and comics. And then on the very bottom, I have adult SFF and some YA SFF. And then in my room, I have another shelf that's strictly nonfiction and classics. So that's how I organize. And of course my shelves are super, super low because of the baby, and they are fastened to the wall. But hopefully as she gets older and we move, we can shift back to the regular shelves. So these are actually shelves that were tall that we flipped on their sides and cut them down and rebuilt them a little bit in order to accommodate the fact that I have a toddler. Okay, so Anna asked, has it been difficult getting your community involved and letting people know the resources the library provides besides checking out books? They said, I just finished my first semester at Texas Women's University at MLIS. Wow, and I'm so excited about your library videos. Well, thank you, and congratulations on finishing your first semester. I'm sure you're probably back in school at this point, so I am super happy for you. I hope your school year is going well. I know it's a little shift and things being different because of COVID. I would say that because of COVID, it has been difficult. So it all depends upon your area. The area that I work in is a low access to Wi-Fi type of situation. We were very useful in terms of computer access and internet access. So, and not Wi-Fi access, y'all. I should have said internet access in the beginning. So getting the word out now because of COVID has been a little bit challenging. So we've had to connect with our community partners a little bit more in order to hopefully help them get the word out. But it's so hard when you're in a walking community and it is a community that needs access to internet, that doesn't necessarily always translate in being able to reach out to the community. We have great access to our community partners, so working with them has been easier, but it has changed the way in which we communicate. Like, it used to be so easy because it's a very tight-knit community. I love that community. I love working there. It's just, I love it. But COVID has really shown, as in many places, it's shown the disparities and inequities of a lot of communities, and we are no different. So has it been difficult? Yes. Are we having to be a little bit more creative and work a little differently? Yeah, I'm just hoping that we can get to a place where we are able to kind of have that same level of influence that we've had pre-COVID. The next question that I got asked is from Lady Pleasant, and it's, do people donate books to the library that you work at? Yes, they do. Are there any rules about donating books? So no, not necessarily. Actually, no, there are no rules. It's just, if you have books to donate, donate them. It's a little different now because of COVID. I don't know if anybody's really accepting donations because of people and having them in their house. It's a tricky situation. Okay, so my camera got full, so I'm not even sure where I left off in that. But like I was saying probably multiple times, is that there are no rules. And the next question is, how does a book donation work from someone dropping them off to the next person loaning it from the shelf? So we actually do not put ours on our shelves. If you make a book donation, it does not automatically go into circulation. Every library may have a different system, but for the most part, from what I know and from the systems that are near the systems where I work, what I have seen is that most libraries do take those donations and they sell them at their library book sales. So those library book sales where you're getting books for like $1 or $2 and you get all these books, those books typically come from individuals who donate those books, and then the money that is made from those book sales goes directly back into libraries for programming. And multiple systems do that. I've seen multiple systems do that. I don't know many systems where they actually put the books into circulation. They may actually have like a shelf within their library where people are allowed to take books as they please, but I have seen it where books go into the library book sale. That's where all those books usually end up coming from. And the next question is, what if there are multiples of the same edition? So it's not going to matter if there's multiples of the same edition. Like, they're for people to take and keep, so the more the merrier. So the next question comes from Natalie. It says, what would you suggest doing for undergrad to present the strongest application? I've been considering majoring in English and volunteering or working part-time in the children's department at my local library. I think that applying for grad school just in general is a tricky situation. It is like applying for any college. It's no different. Getting your MLS or applying for graduate school for your MLIS is going to be no different than any application process that you would go through with any graduate school. One thing that I will say is that your passion for librarianship should be exuded in whatever you have to write in terms of like essays or answering questions. That's super important because I want to look at individuals who are super passionate about working in this field, because our jobs are about helping people. So I would definitely recommend making sure that you know that this is something that you genuinely want to do, that this is something that you're passionate about. I think volunteering in your local library is a good step because it's going to give you a real life feel for what it's like to work in a library, and it's going to dispel those misconceptions of what librarians actually do. I think that as long as you show that passion, you know, I think that most people still are requiring GRE scores. You have good undergraduate transcripts, good recommendation letters. You have some volunteer experience, meaning that you want to get involved in the library. I think all of those combined together will make you a strong candidate. So, and everybody's application process is so different. So without knowing the specifics, I'm not sure specifically what advice to give you, except the fact that I think that your passion should be shown. I think that it's going to be great that you're showing your interest by volunteering at your local library in the children's department. Those are all great things. I just feel like all of that together, along with all the other requirements, will make you a strong candidate. All right, so we're going to do 2 more questions, and the first one comes from Voice Memos for the Void, and they asked me, what was the process of becoming a teen librarian specifically? Did you get to pick that after working with all ages, or were there qualifications qualifications you had that helped you argue for this transition? Okay, so I actually had to interview for my position. It wasn't just kind of a transition. I interviewed for it. And what did end up helping me is that I, as a librarian assistant, had been specifically working with ages 12 to 18. Am I capable of working with all ages? Yes. Do I have a specific passion for 0 to 18? Yes. I have an even more specific passion for 12 to 18. So it wasn't anything that I necessarily had to do. It's just that I had the experience and I interviewed for it. So I brought to the table that I had already done teen programming. I was very good at teen advisory. I had a strong interest in working with the community. So all of those things together is the process. And teen librarian positions are coveted. And I'm so thankful and so grateful for that position, because librarian positions in general, y'all, are very coveted. People seem to think that it is easy to get a job at the library. It is not. I remember for a hiring process in a position that some other individuals that were going through, and I was privy to the knowledge, like there were like 400 applicants, okay, for one position. They're very highly coveted positions. Teen librarianship positions are very, very coveted because there's not a lot of them. So I'm grateful and I'm thankful and I'm very appreciative of the fact that I was able to get the position and just be able to do what I'm passionate about. It's like once in a lifetime type of situation where this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I was able to get the position type of situation. But I definitely do think just having the experience, and then I had the degree, I've been working with the same age group, I took specific courses related to this age group, and a position had opened up and I was like, I'm gonna shoot for it, because I think I actually got the position before I graduated, but I was only a few months out from graduation, and I was like, I'm gonna gun for it, and I ended up getting the position. So I don't think there's any specific process. Most teen librarian positions are going to require that you have a master's in library information science, although once again, cycling back to this question, not all, it depends upon the system. But to have that title, a lot of places are going to still require that you have a master's in library information science and that you have experience working with teens, or that you've taken courses. And so yeah, sorry, it's such a long answer. And the last question is from 6 Minutes for Me, and their question is, which titles have you recommended the most to readers over your career? So I think in the past couple of years, I have recommended Percy Jackson to no end. I really have. And it's so sad to say that, because that is the one title to me that stands out so much. And this is when I was in the area where I was doing super, super heavy readers advisory. These were kids from all ages, not specifically teens. I think with a lot of the teens that I was working with, they kind of knew what they liked. I rarely ever worked with a teen that did not know what they liked to read at that point, but I did work with a lot of like children and middle grade kids who really were trying to figure out what genres they were really into, and Percy Jackson was like a go-to for all of the kids. It was, I think at the time, I think Percy Jackson was a big one. I think that Magic Tree House was a big one, and these were books that we had such a hard time keeping on the shelf. And it was so interesting because in my generation, I feel like Harry Potter was very pivotal, but in the generation after me, I feel like they got Percy, maybe even a little bit after me, but I do feel like at least in the generation after me, they got Percy. So the interest in what they were reading was a little different than what I grew up reading. So definitely Percy. And I still recommend Percy here. I recommend Percy to everybody. You don't have to be a kid or a teen, anybody. Everybody should read Percy Jackson because it's such a great middle grade fantasy series. All right, y'all, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I love doing these librarian Q&A videos. I was supposed to do once a month, but I got caught up in pushing so much other content out that I just have not gotten back to getting to these questions. I'm hoping that was 10 questions. If it wasn't, forgive me, because we were coming up on like 30 minutes of this video, so I wanted to make sure it wasn't super, super long. But I love this. If you have any other questions that you want answers to about just being a librarian, what it's like to be in a library, let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content, click the subscribe button. If you've made it this far, let me know what is your favorite part about the library. And if you're looking for ways to support my channel or follow me on social media, all of my links will be down in the description box below. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, night, evening, whatever, wherever you are. And I'll be back with another video soon.